Hello folks, thank you so much for joining me today for my Asian Readathon wrap-up. I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read for the month of May, Asian Pacific Heritage Month. Thank you so much to Cindy from Read with Cindy for organizing this whole thing. It was so exciting to see her post that initial video explaining all the challenges and rules, and just the idea of reading a bunch of books for a whole month that celebrate Asian heritage sounded so exciting to me, and I read a lot of great things this month, so I'm very excited to be talking to you about them today. Now, I will go in the order that I finished the books in. I did read a few manga. I actually just read one manga. I read one manhwa. Is that how you say that? One of the reasons that I was really excited to do this Asian Readathon was because when I told my girlfriend about it, I didn't really expect her to be interested in participating because she's not really much of a reader. But manga was a part of things that counted for the challenges in this readathon, and she reads a lot of manga, so that really excited her, and it was just a lot of fun getting her recommendations. Of course, I didn't really have time to read all of the manga that I wanted this month, but it was fun reading Bloom Into You with her and being able to discuss it together. I'm not really somebody who reads manga, so that was a new experience for me, and it was fun. The first book that I read is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan. I don't know how to say her last name. I apologize. Definite trigger warning for sexual assault and violence. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy novel. It takes place in this Asiatic fantasy setting where every year 8 girls get called up to the royal palace to serve as the king's concubines. They have to be from the paper caste, which is the lowest class, and our main character gets forcefully taken from her home to serve as a concubine for the king. I rate Girls of Paper and Fire 4 out of 5 stars. It was really interesting, and I definitely recommend that you give it a try. I think it's a great fantasy. Being from the paper caste is actually a pretty interesting concept because the caste system in this world is based on how many animal characteristics you have. So the paper caste is people who are 100% human. They're just normal people like you and me. The steel caste is one level up. They are humans with animal characteristics. So imagine a person with cat ears, or somebody with deer antlers, or a person with bird wings, something cool like that. And the highest caste, which makes up pretty much everybody in the royal palace, is the moon caste, and these are entirely animal people. I was literally imagining like BoJack Horseman style characters, basically just anthropomorphic beings. When Lei, the protagonist, described somebody to be cat form or dog form, I was just picturing dog head, human hands. I thought that the whole premise of the caste system and these people having animal characteristics was pretty interesting. And I also, of course, love the fact that this takes place in an Asiatic fantasy setting, because honestly, most of the fantasy reads or even fantasy shows or movies are based on European culture. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy those stories or that I don't enjoy European culture, but I love me some Asian representation here, even if the story doesn't take place in real life, because you know what? Fantasy reflects real life. When I think of Asian-inspired fantasy settings, I think of one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Avatar: The Last Airbender, but no books really come to mind right now that take place in Asiatic fantasy settings. So if you have any recommendations, I would love to hear them. I like to see a celebration of my heritage, or in this case, the heritage of the author, which was Malaysian. I loved seeing all the Asian influences, and it was all so great. You could see it in the food, the clothes, the color symbolism, the basis of the magic system, the names of the characters, the names of the provinces. I've been reading a lot of contemporary, and it's not that I try to shy away from fantasy, but it was really refreshing to just read a good fantasy story, because it's just a lot of fun to immerse yourself in a completely made-up world. So while I did like the world, I do think that the world building kind of left me wanting more. I wanted to see more of like the nuances in the way that the king ran his politics, because he's really painted as this villain and this antagonistic figure. I was left wondering more about like the differences between these different provinces and their mythologies, their beliefs, their different customs. And I was also really interested to learn more about the mythology of this world and the origins, especially with this whole idea that the caste system is based on humans having different amounts of animal characteristics. This book is the first in a series, so maybe we'll get more of those things in the future, but as far as the world building goes, it was a good foundation. I was just left wanting more. As far as other things that fell a little bit short for me, there was this whole idea of girls of paper and fire introduced, because the girls are of paper because they're of the paper caste, and then they're of fire because they're like defiant or something. I don't know. I just feel like Lei was supposed to be presented as this really brave girl with fire running through her veins, but I didn't really see that much strong evidence that she was a rebel. She always stands up for what she believes in. The one act that she did that a lot of other characters in the book seem to herald her for being really brave just kind of seemed more an act of fear than anything to me. That's how it came across when I read it. I just felt like if the author was going to use that metaphor, that Lei should have been developed more as a character who was someone who was really brave and defiant and stood up for what she believed in. I was also not digging the romance. Like, it was great in theory because I love reading about gay girl couples, but these two just didn't have that much chemistry in my opinion. I didn't feel like they had a super strong foundation for their romance, so I wasn't really given much reason to root for this couple. I just wasn't into it, and I really wish I was, because it's an important part of the story. Kind of sucks that I basically have no emotional investment in the main romance. The last thing that fell a little bit short for me was the writing. It was a little bit awkward at times. The author seemed to really like cutting away to one-sentence paragraphs. I feel like cutting away to a one-sentence paragraph to emphasize a certain idea is a good tool in writing, but I felt like Natasha Ngan overused that particular method. But she also had a lot of really great metaphors and imagery. There were some really beautiful quotes that came out of this book. One of my favorites that became a very prevalent theme in the story was, "I don't want an easy life, I want a meaningful one." That really struck a chord with me. All in all, I also thought that the story was very entertaining. The stakes just kept getting higher and higher throughout the entire thing, all the way up to the end. I was absolutely on the edge of my seat. There was some mystery that was interwoven into the story, and Lei was dealing with a lot of internal struggle that was pretty compelling to read about. For some reason, when I was reading, I compared this book to The Hunger Games in my head, because I found the similarity in the storyline, and I don't mean this as a bad thing, because I think that these elements made both of these stories more interesting to read. They're both stories about this girl who lives on the outskirts of her country. She gets called up as a part of this group of people who get called up every year to go up to the capital, or the royal palace in this case, to basically serve as pieces of entertainment for the upper class. They're not people, they're just objects. You also have this juxtaposition of these characters giving up their freedom and their livelihood with the fact that they're living lives of luxury. I feel like that contrast between being treated with abundance but basically having to serve as a part of a game against your will makes for interesting story and interesting conflict and internal struggle. That's compelling to read. I'm pretty excited for the sequel. Next, I finished Starfish by Akemi Bowman. I rate this 5 out of 5 stars, and the reason that I picked it up was because I was watching a video from Paperback Dreams, Kat. It was her favorite books, choose her TBR, and for Radio Silence, she chose to read Starfish, and I love Radio Silence. I have a full book review video if you want to go check that out on my channel. I actually did not realize that the main character was half Asian when Kat was talking about it in her TBR video, so I was very pleased to find that out and find out that I would be able to read it for Asian Readathon. Starfish is about this girl named Kiko who is trying to get into art school. I feel like that's why people compared this book to Radio Silence, is because she's trying to figure out what she wants to do with her future after high school, and there are a lot of bumps in the road. There's a lot of internal struggle going on. There is a friendship with a boy. That's pretty much where the similarities end. And I don't really want to compare it too much to Radio Silence because this book was just so great on its own. I actually flipped back and forth between rating this for or 5 stars a lot while I was reading it, but by the end, just the satisfaction that I had from reading about Kiko's character development was absolutely amazing. This is one of the best coming of age stories that I think I've ever read. Kiko is dealing with a lot of internal struggle and anxiety. A big part of the story is her relationship with her mother, which is very heated. She also struggles with trying to find connection with her Japanese heritage. She's half white, half Japanese. She's also trying to find herself as an artist because she wants to go to art school. The lessons that she learned by the end of the book just came together so organically and beautifully. Even though I'm not half white, half Asian, I am Asian, and I connected with a lot of the things that Kiko had to deal with, like racist people, and growing up in a world where media basically tells you that the standard of beauty is white. I do have to warn you, reading about Kiko's relationship with her mother is the most frustrating thing ever. I don't remember the last time I've been this frustrated and emotionally tense while reading a book. Like, this wasn't the same kind of emotionally tense as when I was reading The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because that was just me freaking out all the time and wanting Evelyn to be happy. But when I was reading this book, I was just so tense all the time because all of her interactions with her mother were so unhealthy and it was hard to watch. And it was kind of like a big oof for me because the way that they argued, it reminded me a little bit of the way that I argue with my mom and the way that we get mad at each other sometimes. Of course, my mom's not nearly as bad as Kiko's mom, but whew, I didn't expect this book to be relatable in that way. Kiko's mom, she is a terrible person. She really gives Carol from Radio Silence a run for her money. Sorry, I didn't mean to compare this to Radio Silence. I just thought, if you've read Radio Silence, you know how terrible Carol is. The next thing that I finished reading was a manga. It's called Bloom Into You, and I read it because my girlfriend reads a lot of manga and she wanted to read this one with me. So it's still ongoing, but I am caught up to the most recent update, and I'll definitely leave a link in the description to the website that I used to read it on my phone. It's really easy and accessible. Bloom Into You has some entertainment value. And that's basically it for the list of things that I liked about this manga. I feel like the romance is problematic. The characters are doing things, well, mainly Toko, Nanami, was doing things that made me feel uncomfortable. And was she really being called out on the things that she was doing that may have been problematic? Not really. The author seems to have a skewed perception of love, and I think that really affected the quality of the romance and the story. The side characters are basically pointless. Like, they're so forgettable. I don't even know what all of their names are. And honestly, not even the main characters are even that developed or have realistic, definable personality traits. Actually, I forgot. I have a second thing to put on the list of good things about Bloom Into You. The art is really good. I love the art. I'm sad that it isn't colored. There are a few colored pages. The colored pages that are included are beautiful. I guess that's what the anime is for, which I might start watching. I don't know. Oh, I never actually said what it was about. So the main character is, what's her name? Why did I forget her name? Yu! Her name is Yu. Okay. So the story basically starts out with Yu trying to figure out how she's going to reject a boy. And she sees this girl named Nanami Toko, who is 1 year older than her, gracefully reject somebody who has just confessed their love to her. Yu asks for advice on how to turn somebody down in a friendly way. Toko is attracted to the fact that she thinks that Yu would never fall for her. She gets a crush on Yu. The feelings are unrequited. It kind of just goes from there. They're both part of the student council. Am I explaining this in a way that makes sense? The next thing that I read was actually a reread. I read Their Story, which is, oh my gosh, I haven't been saying what challenges any of these books fulfill. It's fine. I'll put it in the description or something. Their Story actually fulfills all of the challenges that Cindy put out for this readathon. But of course, I wasn't just going to read one thing. So I read a bunch of other things this month too. Their Story is written by an Asian author. She's Chinese. It's a webcomic basically. It fulfills the graphic novel challenge. It was translated from its original language, which is Chinese, and it includes intersectional Asian characters. This is another gay love story, fellas. Their story tells the story of Sun Jing and Shu Tong. I don't really know if I'm saying that right. I know, okay, I'm Chinese, but I don't speak Chinese, and I'm pretty out of touch with my own heritage. It's kind of sad. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing their names wrong. Sun Jing and Shu Tong go to different schools. Sun Jing sees Shu Tong at the bus station, gets a crush on her, they become friends, and it's basically like just a little slice of life from there with some story arcs thrown in. If you're gonna read one thing on this list and you're short on time, just read their story. It's a really quick read. I'll link the Tumblr page in the description. It's really easy to navigate. You can just click next on every single post and be taken to the next episode. This story is so cute. It's so heartwarming. It's so wholesome, and it makes me so happy. It just gives you all those wonderful fluttery feelings because Sun Jing and Shu Tong's relationship is just amazing. The way they care for each other and the way their friendship blooms. The story means a lot to my girlfriend and I because it really reminds us of us and our story. Part of the reason that I connect emotionally with this story is because it reminds me of my own relationship with my girlfriend. And you'll even end up liking all the side characters, even the ones who don't have names. You just can't help but love everybody in this series. My reasons for liking their story are pretty simple. Please check it out if you want some cuteness in your life. Oh, I also really love the art. And it's colored, which is great. I love this artist's style. All right, the last thing that I finished was 1,000 Beginnings and Endings, which was the group book, as I'm sure you all know. It was organized and edited by Ellen O and Elsie Chapman. It's just a collection of short stories that were inspired by Asian folktales. The genres of these stories span like literally everything from contemporary to fantasy to sci-fi. And the stories are really diverse. There's Filipino, Chinese, Punjabi, Vietnamese, Japanese, South Asian. Okay, I finished this book like literally this morning. I feel bad because I don't really have that much to say about it. The other short story collections that I've read are Because You Love to Hate Me. Only a few stories in that anthology really stood out to me as being exceptionally good. And then the other anthology that I've read is All Out, which had a bunch of LGBTQ authors write LGBTQ stories. I picked that up because LGBTQ representation, duh. But I felt really lukewarm about a lot of the stories. I honestly got a little bit bored reading some of these stories. My favorite stories in this anthology were Land in the Morning Calm by E.C. Myers, which was Korean, and it was like a ghost story, and it started out kind of creepy, but it ended up being really satisfying and fulfilling, so I really liked that one. The other one that I liked was called Code of Honor by Melissa de la Cruz. It was really giving me like Rebel Belle vibes, and I was quite entertained when I read Rebel Belle many years ago, and I felt like the way that Melissa de la Cruz wrote this story felt like it could be the first chapter in a novel or something. If she wrote a novel that was just a continuation of this story, I would be down to read it. A lot of the stories actually felt like they could be chapters in a book that tells a longer story, and I don't know if that's good or bad. To what degree should a short story leave you feeling like you want more? And at what point do you say, this feels incomplete? I guess another story I want to highlight is The Crimson Cloak by Cindy Pon, because I think that it captured the essence of what I expected this book to be, because the author took a Chinese folktale and she just retold it basically from another perspective, because she felt like the female lead in all the legends of this story that she's read basically didn't have a voice. So she gave that female character a voice, and I appreciated that perspective. I was also going to read A Silent Voice, the manga, because my girlfriend told me that the one-shot was really, really good. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it online in time. I'm sorry that I didn't get to read it or talk about it with you today, but I will definitely find it and I will read it at some point. I guess that's all I have for you today. This was so much fun. Thank you once again to Cindy from Read with Cindy for putting this whole thing together. I can't wait to do it again next year. Thank you so much for watching. Tell me what you read for Asian Readathon, if you participated, and the thoughts that you might have on any of the books that I mentioned in this video if you've also read them. I'd love some more recommendations, like I said, for Asian fantasy reads, for manga, for anything. anything. Recommend anything you think is good to me. Thanks so much for watching. My name's Jazz. Take care of yourself. Bye. I got a new plushie. His name is George.